Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room? It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th.
We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest or guests bring with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guests are filmmakers Vanessa and Joseph Winter. Their debut feature film, Deadstream, just hit Shudder, and they also created the segment To Hell and Back in VHS 99, which is coming out this week on Shudder when this episode drops. Welcome to the show, guys!
Dude, thank you.
Thanks for having us. It's a privilege to be here.
Thanks for coming. We're really excited to talk with you. But how wild is that, though? Two movies literally like within like what, a week of each other? Isn't it about a week?
Pretty weird.
Yeah, because we premiered Deadstream at South by in March, and we would not have believed someone if they were to even float the idea that we may have two movies coming out in the same year, let alone just a couple of weeks from each other on the same platform. It's just wild. The way, like the twists and turns that have come since then.
Yeah.
So cool.
That is so cool. But take us back to the very beginning. How did you both get introduced to the horror genre as a kid?
I didn't grow up watching a lot of horror movies. Okay. I always loved horror. Like when I was 4, I was obsessed with the Beetlejuice cartoon. And I had a bunch of like ghost story books that were well worn that I kept in my room. My brother and I would catch like the Hollywood movies, but we were just kind of culturally isolated. I grew up in a really small town in Wyoming, and our parents were fairly conservative about media. So I just didn't have a ton of exposure. So it really wasn't until college when I really fell hard for horror, but also cinema in general. But I was always weird. I mean, I was always the girl that had to be in a scary costume every Halloween. My mom was like super supportive of that. She helped me make like clay snakes to put in my hair to be Medusa when I was in elementary school. And so, I mean, yeah, it was.
That's so. Do you have pictures of that? I just want to see what that costume looked like. That is so badass.
Dude, I'll see if she can dig it up. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, for me, it was my parents were, I don't know why they let me watch some of the things that we watched, but from my earliest memories, I was watching horror movies with my parents, and Halloween themed birthdays every year, even though my birthday was in November. It was just something, it was just a really big part of me. And I think the thing that made me want to be on the filmmaking side of horror is we rented the making of Thriller, of Michael Jackson's Thriller from Blockbuster when I was very little. And in it, you can see these zombies after the shoot peeling the latex off of their faces. And I asked my parents, what is that? Can you find out what that is? And so they started just calling people that they knew, trying to figure out. My dad was like taking notes for me, trying to help me. And I must have been 5 or something, but I still remember it so vividly. And that just has stuck with me ever since. So, I mean, back then it was, I saw Creepshow at a very early age, and that remains in my top 3 of all time. I watched a movie called The Gate from 1987.
Oh, yeah.
A lot. Monster Squad, Silver Bullet, and those were my main 4 in really early years. And then when I met Vanessa in college, she for sure would have been like me with the parents that introduced you to horror early on, like no doubt, because it was like waiting to be unleashed when we started diving into some of the movies.
Although you claim to have been scared by nothing as a kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know that would have been me.
That's not most people. I don't know what my problem was, but it was just fun. It just didn't give me the being afraid was kind of a thrill. Like my dad, after watching a scary movie, would tell my sister and I to go turn off a light down the hallway, and then we'd have to run back in the dark. And it was always just a fun feeling.
Huh.
And so, Vanessa, were you scared as a kid though? Like, did you get scared easily? I mean, because you didn't have a lot of horror stuff, but you had some horror media. Did you get scared easily?
I probably said like a decent amount. Like I really enjoy it, but there's like I would always catch things on TV, like parts of The Shining, or I'm pretty sure it was the movie Alligator that I saw clips of as a kid. And there's one that I haven't tracked down, which I'm pretty sure has killer bunnies in it, or sheep or something. There was some other kind of animal horror that I would catch little clips of. And then I'm also pretty sure that I caught glimpses of what's the name of the baby movie?
It's Alive?
It's Alive.
Oh.
Yeah. I was like, there's a lot of baby.
I knew he would get it. Yeah. So there was like imagery like that I would see and get really scared. And my brother and I were all about creating really good atmospheres for The Sixth Sense or The Ring or something. And then we would hide under each other's beds and scare each other. So there was a fun element to it. But like, I guess fairly easily. Like, I think I stayed, like, after watching The Ring, I think I thought about it for a few hours before falling asleep. And I was a teenager, so.
Well, I have to admit, when I saw The Ring as a teenager, that was like the most scared after the movie. Like one of a few experiences that I'd had since I was a kid. That's just a really effective movie.
It's a very effective movie. Because that came out early 2000s, and I would have been, I guess, wasn't it early 2000s? I think I would have been in my 20s, and that still affected me. Although I was the asshole that would call my friends, and be like 7 days.
Yeah, you fucking suck. Like, why?
Every
time you tell that story, I'm like, you were mean. I would be so mad at you.
Okay, so it sounds like Joseph, you were not scared as a kid. Is that transitioned into adulthood? Do horror movies not scare you at all?
Okay. So to clarify, scared, yes, but it was fun. It was
fun.
like
okay.
Spooky scared, with very few exceptions. Yes, that's how I feel now. So when I watch a movie like It Follows, I haven't seen Smile yet, but I've heard that it has the same kind of ability that It Follows had. But when I saw it in the theater, it did something like, for the first time in a long time, I had felt, I guess, like kind of dreading the next image if I thought that something was coming. And I thought about it for a while, and it was still that same pleasant feeling. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to walk in the bathroom and turn on a light or anything like that. But it was, it's the same thing. I feel like it's probably even less now, just because I've seen so much stuff that it takes even more to make me feel a little bit spooky scared.
Yeah. Home invasion movies will always get to me.
They'll never get to me. Home invasion is the least scary.
Why?
It's disturbing. It's disturbing, but it doesn't scare, because I feel like I'm way more likely to see a ghost in a mirror than have someone enter my house and try to kill me.
Wow.
Interesting.
More likely,
This
you've
is
never
why.
even seen a ghost.
How many people, we've never talked about this before. I'm saying this out loud for the first time. How many people do you know who have had their home invaded in like some kind of scary way? I'm going to guess maybe one. How many people do you know in your life who have claimed to have seen a ghost and mean it? Way more than one. And I just feel like you get that feeling about to turn on a light in a bathroom after a scary movie or something, where I feel like not that something's out to get me, just that you might see something. Like that's the feeling that scares me, not the actual danger part. Baked into ghost horror to me is a feeling of danger long before you even know a motivation. I don't know if you've noticed this, but in a movie, as soon as there's an apparition or as soon as the music becomes a certain thing and you can tell that there's going to be a sighting. In The Conjuring, it does this long before you know that even most of the ghosts that they're seeing have no ill intention. It's really scary because they're ghosts. So that's what makes me...
Whatever you say, like, I do not want to see a strange man in my basement. And that's stuff
either.
The Strangers is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, in my opinion.
Ugh.
I'd say disturbing.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to fight with anybody. I'm just saying.
It's really interesting because it's so interesting because I feel like a lot of the time when we talk to people, they talk about how home invasion is the scariest to them. And like, I feel very similarly. So it's really interesting because it's like always like, oh, well, home invasion can actually happen and ghosts aren't real. Or is usually kind of like the conclusion a lot of people say. I have seen a ghost or I have had experiences, so I'm less likely to feel that way. Or at least I think I have. I don't fucking know. But anyway, it's an interesting perspective.
Well, and I was nodding along while you were talking, Joseph, because I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in that at all. However, ghost movies are the ones that typically will scare me the most. I'm thinking back to like Insidious or Terrified or even Hereditary, which isn't ghosts but is supernatural. Like I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff, but that's the stuff that will fuck me up. So I get it. I'm right there with you.
Well, since you guys are the experts, do you think and you've had time to analyze other people, do you feel like ghosts are scarier because you can't actually physically fight them? Like, is that part of it?
I do wonder. I think a lot of times it's because they can do things that like you're not expecting. Like a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that scares people that we've talked to about ghosts is that it just happens unexpectedly, or there's nothing you can really do about it. Like other than picking up and moving, it's like you're pretty much kind of fucked.
Yeah, like, you know, with people you can fight back, like you're saying, but with a ghost, it's a little bit harder to figure out how to deal with them. And again, like they defy the laws of physics, and so again, it's a little bit more like something opens or something falls. Like it's a lot more terrifying because you don't know what did that and like what the source is. So I think because those things kind of defy what we know of in terms of what's possible in the real world, it is scarier.
We've also talked with a lot of people that were raised Catholic, whether they still are or not, but they were raised Catholic. And there's a lot of that supernatural fear baked into that, because that comes up an awful lot on the podcast. Like, well, I was raised Catholic, so that's why this terrifies me. And that I think comes up a whole lot.
We both had Mormon upbringings, and the cultural I mean, it's very your average Mormon person will say, oh, I like scary movies except for the demonic stuff. And the reason why is because that's also part of it. You hear those stories like told in real life, like firsthand, like I encountered this person that had this, it was clearly they had a demon. So there's that aspect, I guess, growing up, whether I was aware of it or not, but just growing up hearing that this is fact, like this part of the horror, I guess the horror genre, this is the corner of it that's real. And it just felt more real to me than somebody. It was cool seeing Jason, like whack trees with sleeping bags of someone in it. It's like, that was cool, but I didn't think that would happen to me, but I thought maybe I could see a demon.
There's a cool like subgenre of Mormon lore, you could say, which is Mormon youths, I guess you could say, typically go on missions, a 2-year mission when they turn 19, where things have changed now. But when I was growing up, you would leave and not have very much contact with home. So you were fairly isolated in whatever country you were around the world. And so there's lots of supernatural stories that come back out of that. that are
imagine.
often like demonically related, and they're pretty fun. Like they're pretty scary because they're very first person.
Oh,
and
especially when these kids are sent to foreign lands where the culture is completely different and they're immersed into it, and like she's saying,
they're not speaking the language very well, and
cut off from everything, and so they encounter cultural things that they're not used to, and they will oftentimes project like a satanic aspect to it, which makes for some really spooky stories when you're talking to someone who's like, and then I walked into a house and this person looked at me and started yelling these chants, and like it's just really it's actually really fun.
Wait, did either of you go on a mission?
No.
I was curious if you had any creepy stories about
I know.
that.
I wish we had
kinds of other people's mission stories.
I didn't think about that. Ooh, that's interesting. Anyway, before I fall into that rabbit hole of thinking about mission stories. But then I'm curious, Vanessa, what is a movie that has scared you recently or given you kind of like the feelings of childhood fear that you had?
That's a really good question. This is going to be so weird, but the thing that scared me probably the most in the last 10 years was the Witch trailer.
Oh, really?
Such a good trailer.
It is a good trailer.
I was like just watching it alone, like on my phone in bed. And man, it's just so bizarre. It's just like everything has this foreboding, icky feeling to it. And
and it's also
I pulled up the cover, it's extra tight. And like the movie was great. I love the movie, but the trailer.
But the trailer literally has text, feels like something you shouldn't be watching. Like while you're seeing the imagery, you know?
Dude, but that wasn't that, like for me, it was like just the milk blood or something. Like, I don't know.
The peekaboo where the kid vanishes. There's just so many weird little moments in that trailer that are now coming back to me the moment you said that. I was like, what was that trailer? And then they just sort of like started popping in, and I remember that going, oh wow, what is going on here?
Yeah, people's faces. Yeah, I think I had a pretty good experience with It Follows too. Cool. We saw it on like a really rainy night, and the theater we saw it in was really thumping the music.
Oh wow,
super, super loud. So I had a pretty good atmospheric experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
The Conjuring, I had a really fun experience with. It was partly the people one of my best friends is a costume designer for film. She sat next to me and she took off her glasses because she was getting scared. So that it feel like a little bit blurry. And so, yeah, I don't know.
It was a particularly good movie.
It got me. Yeah,
for that.
The bedroom scene is it's pretty good.
That's
where
incredible.
It's on top of like the wardrobe, that moment, or
I like the one before, the lead up, the nightmare between the two sisters. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So like with something's behind the door, or she's saying like, oh my gosh, there's something
it's like
there.
standing over in the corner
I
and staring at
rewatched
it.
that scene probably like 50 times.
There's so much
so
dread
good.
in that film.
I rewatched all those movies recently and was like, they're just so good. They're just going to scare me every time I watch them, even though I know what's going to happen. They're always going to be terrifying.
Do you guys have a recent one? Like something you just barely saw? I'm making my Halloween list.
Well, I'm going through a phase of YouTube horror stuff that I'm watching that is giving me and it's the first time in a long time something has given me nightmares that I've watched. So, but it's like analog YouTube like videos, not movies necessarily, but they've got like really cursed energy and cursed vibes. And that's been my Halloween like watching has been like weird YouTube series and things like that.
Ooh, cool.
Smile made me jump like a lot. Like it didn't really affect me after the movie was over, but while watching it, it was definitely a movie that like had me on edge. There's a couple really deceptively smart jump scares in it.
I am a big jump scare fan when it's the art of the jump scare. It totally is an art. And I think that the really crappy ones have given it a bad name where now you can't have a jump scare in your movie without people being like, it has jump scares, therefore it sucked. But I love a good jump scare.
That movie definitely understands the art of misdirection and definitely goosing you at the right moment. It just, I loved it. I actually screamed in the movie theater, and that doesn't happen very often for me.
Yay, I'm excited to go see it.
Another really good one, it's a couple years old, but it's found footage. It's called Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, that has some of the best jump scares. Have you guys seen it?
It's on our list. It's on our list.
It's so good.
It has some of the best jump scares I've ever seen. Like, it's incredible. So it's one of the scariest movies I've also seen in a long time. So definitely check it out.
It's really good.
Yeah.
But speaking about found footage and jump scares and that kind of stuff, can you tell us just a little bit about Deadstream?
Deadstream is about a canceled PewDiePie type YouTuber live streamer that is now staging a comeback event to get his followers and his sponsors back. And for this live stream event, he's going to spend one night alone in a haunted house. His whole gimmick is that he faces his fears and live streams them. But this one is the scariest thing for him yet. So he stages this big event at an abandoned haunted house in the woods in Utah, and things go great for him. The end. It goes incredibly bad for him, violently bad. And hopefully people enjoy seeing this guy get beat to a pulp by ghosts.
One of my favorite tweets I saw this weekend was like, I've started watching this movie and it's been 1 minute and I already want to punch this guy. 10 out of 10, already excited to keep watching.
It's one of those things, man. If you're not into Sean, it could be a really tough thing to get through. But I think if you can latch on to the charm that we tried to attach to his persona, then I think you can have a really good time with it.
So the thing that like immediately struck me and had me rolling when I first saw this back it was out South by, right? Isn't that where? Yeah, that's where I saw it. So many festivals. But the thing that like immediately hooked me in it is that this is a character that I have seen so many times on YouTube that you just nailed the feel of. Like I was thinking back, yes, PewDiePie, and I was thinking back to like all of the people that something bad happens and they have to go do that kind of apology video months later and, you know, try to redeem their persona. But like this is I'm curious, how many YouTube celebrities and people did you have to watch to like nail the feel of this character so perfectly?
Too many. I want to say too many, but the funny thing is, like, the more you start watching, the more, at least for me personally, I started really appreciating the art that goes into being like a talking head, basically. And I started realizing that especially some of these guys are really brilliant comedians. Mm-hmm. And so as I was writing, I just kept getting more and more intimidated by the challenge of writing somebody that you could actually be watchable for 90 minutes.
It was so I mean we laughed like, oh, too many of them, like as though, you know, we look down on it. And the thing is, that's how we approached it, unfortunately. But as we started latching on to certain individuals, like, oh, this is a little bit of Sean, so I'm going to watch his stuff, I, at least for myself, got attached to them. And I didn't realize that until I started defending a couple of them sometimes a little bit and realizing, what am I doing? What I've really gotten attached to some of these guys. And like on my lunch breaks at work, I was watching them for research and quotes, but I actually was like, oh, I wonder what this new video is. And that's when we started talking about it and really realized that we will have failed this character if it is a parody and there is no aspect to this person that anyone would ever watch. So we hoped that when people watch it, even if they wouldn't watch Sean, they would at least believe that there was an audience for him somewhere.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can you share some of the people that you latched on to? You don't have to if it's late, but I'm just curious, like what YouTubers you kind of gravitated towards.
Let me say this. I won't say like, these are people that I'm really big fans of and stand by the things that they've done or said. But these are the people that we latched onto as like Sean inspirations. There was PewDiePie for sure. And one of the things about him, he was like a joke to us. We didn't know anything about him, but when we started watching him, there's some things he does. He makes fun of himself in a way that's like, he goes after himself in uncomfortable ways, like in ways that are genuinely cringy. And he'll play clips of him on TV, on Conan or something, going in for a high five, but then it's a weird handshake, fist bump, and it's like genuinely really uncomfortable. And he'll play it as a cringe video and just make fun of himself. And you can't help but think, this is so endearing in some way, how much he makes fun of himself and puts himself out there. That was one of the people that I started to feel like, oh, I get PewDiePie. I get why people are watching him and feel loyal to him and feel like he's going to go on there and tell them, like, be real with them about what he's experiencing. The other person is, he goes by iDubbbz, and he has a lot of controversy around him, but his sarcasm, his straight face, sarcastic delivery, he does fake unboxing videos where he just opens junk that his fans send him, and his commentary on things was just so funny. We tried to pull
his self-deprecating humor is pretty sharp.
Yeah.
Once you try to replicate it.
Yeah, it's like hard to replicate. It's like that kind of thing where he'll just off the cuff make a reference about his age, and it's just so funny. And then the other person is a guy named Houston Jones,
which we have to credit your dad for.
Yes,
because your dad sent a link to you
in the middle of the night. I got a text from my dad that was just like, watch this. Had nothing. He didn't know about Deadstream, that we were working on this thing. And I opened it, and it was a video of a guy shooting himself in the nuts with paintballs.
Oh,
and I was watching him like, oh, this is it. This is Sean. Like, this guy talks so fast, really over the top energy, and does these crazy inflict harm on himself stunts.
Mm-hmm.
But like, he was bringing to it the way that we wanted.
He was bringing the energy,
yes.
right energy.
So we took the energy of him,
but he's much more endearing than Sean.
Cutting in between my toes with sandpaper so nobody else has to. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Oh my God.
4 days ago, blowing my leg off with a potato cannon so nobody else has to. Oh my God.
Things have escalated since we've checked in with him.
So by the way, I did check in with him recently, and the stuff that he's had to start posting, I guess, to be different is like straight up torture, where I don't even want to see it. Like, it's
that's like the thumbnails are like bruises on his body and like horrific, like he's hurting himself badly for views, which is
I mean, that's the way it seems to go with YouTube, to try to, like, as you said, to kind of find that new niche and to like keep getting viewers. The more and more stuff you have to do to like do that is ridiculous. Because I remember it was like this time where I was really big in watching YouTube stars, and on mine it was a lot of like My Drunk Kitchen, or even the Try Guys, which are going through their own little bit of PR nightmare right now. But it's like all these people, are Markiplier, who is sort of like with PewDiePie and that whole stuff, like the kind of exaggerated persona you have to create in order to like keep getting people to come back to you is, I mean, the YouTube burnout's quite a thing because of that.
We've known a couple of influencers, and the complaint is that you become a slave to it, and it's very soul sucking, and you kind of it does bring out the worst in people, but you can see how they got there when you're looking at like the pressure on them to put out this content on a daily basis, even a weekly basis, is just so much.
Yeah.
We had a couple friends that worked on a documentary about a couple famous personalities, YouTube personalities. And the thing that kept coming back is their schedule just really is grueling. And it just really is kind of punishing to put out that much content. So I think that's something that we tried to bring to Sean's character too, is we wanted it to feel like somebody who cared a lot about their work.
Their craft. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, because I know in terms of like the film editing, you both edited this movie. How much of a pain in the ass was it? Because there's so many different camera angles, from like the camera that's on Sean to the one that's on his face to like the stuff around. How much of a nightmare and how much footage did you have to go through to get something that was cohesive?
The number of cameras wasn't the biggest problem. In fact, I almost wish there would have been more cameras because it takes place in real time. So I think one of the biggest challenges was just to cut around that real-time aspect when we needed to lose some jokes or change the timing. I think, technically speaking, action cameras aren't on the same level as cinema cameras. So just dealing with their weird naming system and files and that kind of stuff in post-production was a big challenge, especially for our post-production supervisor, Jared Cook, who was also the DP and producer. Hats off to him for being a freaking genius.
He's the real MVP. So I want to say this. So Jared Cook, shout out to him. We would call him, Jared, it's linking to the wrong clips. Like it was this way every time we opened the project. It would link to different. Every day the clips would start over in their naming system, or like every time you put in a new card. So in Premiere, it would point to the wrong clip, and it was just a nightmare in that way to work with. But I also want to give credit to Annie Eskander. She was the assistant editor, and she had an impossible job of organizing this footage along the way. And she did a great job. And she was also there for us throughout, like way past when she was getting paid. Like she was no longer getting paid minimum wage to do the movie. And she was just like doing whatever she needed to do to help us with the edit. So yeah, editing, it was a real technical challenge, especially since, I mean, you were saying you wish there were more cameras. I do not share that opinion. I mean, sometimes this was like 9 cameras. We rolled them all at once every time we did it, so that we could try to edit it that way. But it became a nightmare because the editing software could not play back this stuff in real time.
Oh, wow.
So there were challenges in that way. So basically this kind of unconventional movie, it was just not conducive to editing quickly.
But it looks so effortlessly done. Like,
oh, thank you.
That's like, because I've seen this movie like 3 times now, and this last time I was really clued into like just how technical you had to be, because it is real time. That's what I realized. Like, I wasn't really thinking about it when I had my critics hat on. I was like thinking about all that other stuff, and this time I was just like enjoying the movie this last time, and I was like, wow, this really isn't real time, and that just must have been a complete bitch to like edit. That's just what was going through my mind the entire time.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that compliment.
Yeah, we do. That's all I'll say about it. I always feel weird after really complaining about something that I'm actually really grateful worked out. But like, there are real complaints throughout. I mean, it was a very difficult production and post-production process. So thank you for saying that.
But then also briefly, because VHS 99 is coming out just around the corner, what can you tell our listeners what your segment is about? Are you able to talk about it a little bit?
I think we've gotten approved about 2 things, which is, the first is the characters go to hell, literally.
Okay.
So it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty jump the shark, maybe for some people.
We thought it was going to be the jump the shark segment for sure.
It seems like it's being embraced. Some people are embracing it.
Yeah.
The second spoiler that we've been approved to talk about is my favorite creature from the segment, which is a woman that's half woman, half maggot, who our creature designer coined the term wormaid, and that became her nickname.
Oh no!
I want a tattoo of her on my body right now. I love her already. I can't wait to see the wormaid. I'm going to eat those words probably when I see her. I'm like, oh, that's disgusting. But I love the sound of her already.
It's pretty disgusting.
Fuck yes.
The stunt performer was like so badass. This was my favorite part of the whole shoot. But she had to have her arms pinned down to her body in order to perform it.
Oh my God.
So she runs down this hill in this arch.
Like a
anyway,
cliff.
she's
pretty much a little
she's
cliff.
awesome. She also played the bathtub corpse in Deadstream. But
hell
yeah.
Queen shit. She plays a bathtub corpse, a wormaid.
Her name's Ariel Lee. I just want to say her name. She's amazing. If you're ever making it in Utah, she's a great stunt performer.
Hell yeah. Because the screeners just came in today, and I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So I'm really excited.
Oh, I can also tell you tonally, it's similar to Deadstream. It's a completely different type of group of people, but it's the same kind of like silly fun.
Probably even more comedy, I would say.
Hell yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Fuck yeah. Okay, so Joseph and Vanessa, we talked about horror movies and Deadstream and VHS 99.
Speaking of comedies.
Yeah, speaking of comedies, what movie did you bring with you guys today to discuss?
Don't Look Now, the masterpiece.
1973, starring Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie.
So, for those that aren't familiar, here is a quick synopsis pulled from IMDb. In Don't Look Now, a married couple grieving the recent death of their young daughter are in Venice when they encounter 2 elderly sisters, one of whom is psychic and brings a warning from beyond.
So I know this is this is slightly a different take from what we normally do when we do Scar for Life, because I know you both saw this together as adult, I believe. So it's not a movie that scared you as a kid. But can you tell our listeners why this was the movie you both gravitated to, and why this is your Scar for Life pick?
I think it was the movie, when you guys asked the question, it was a movie that popped into our minds where I remembered us both being in the same room, being scared. I don't think that we were officially dating yet.
No,
I can't remember the exact timeline.
How we got there, though, is that thinking back to our childhoods, because we had such different childhoods, there was no common movie that scared us both. So we went to, what's the first scary movie we saw together and had a shared scary experience that actually stayed with us.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And we just we went into it really blind. We were at a friend's house looking through her DVD collection, and Joseph grabbed it and was like, "What about this movie?" And I think her response was like, "Eh."
Didn't she say my dad hates this movie or something like that?
I don't know. Like, she just didn't really like it, but we were like 70s Donald Sutherland.
Yeah, because we had seen Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the 70s with Donald Sutherland, and we were just I at least was really into the 70s and the aesthetic of it, and so I was eating it all up. And so yeah, we just took it, and we took it to, I lived in this apartment complex that had this basement that no one really used except to store bicycles, and I had converted it into a screening room, but it was just an SD TV, had like a VCR and stuff, and we went down there and just popped it in.
Which sounds like heresy, like when you rewatch it, because it's so freaking beautiful. Like every frame is so beautiful.
But it just shows you, like, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know anything. Now everybody who has seen it or has heard of it knows of a specific moment in the movie. We did not know of that moment. So we just had no idea what we were pressing play on, which actually added to this experience that has stayed with us since.
So what was the experience of going in cold and seeing this movie for the first time, not knowing how it ends? And we're going to spoil it, so we can talk all about that. But what was your feeling? What was your experience watching this film?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's one of those feelings that I'm always chasing in horror, which is just to be genuinely shocked, but that shock also to feel like, oh, it was also inevitable. This weird, and I have a hard time thinking of a movie that the ending is just so bizarre, and at least for me, landed so horrifying. I remember even as the moment was happening, I was like, this is the most bizarre ending, but I am so terrified. And I can feel it. Like, this is getting to me on every level.
My experience with it was, as we were watching it, it was clearly a slow burn. It was so obvious this is what this movie is. It's taking its time. It's simmering. It's beautiful imagery. The color. I was just taking in the color palette and the texture of the film and the music. There was mostly no music, but sometimes they would have music over these montages. And I was just like, yeah, let's have this slow burn movie that kind of hints at some supernatural. It's kind of like The Shining Light is kind of how I would describe it, where The
Shining Light.
It's like a guy that maybe he has the shining, like that kind of thing, or he's seeing, what do you call it? Premonitions. He's having premonitions, but refusing to accept that that's what it is. But you can clearly see that he's sensitive, but it's not really hitting you over the head. It's just taking you on a slow journey. And then the color, the way it's using the color red and the way he's seeing these certain motifs, I realized at the very end, it was all for this moment. Every single thing that happened was for this moment at the very end. And I did not see it coming. And it was, should we jump to the end, or is that going to be a special?
Whatever you want. Yeah. If it's part of your first time experience watching it, let's do it. Yeah.
Well, do you want to describe what happens at the end?
You go for it.
Okay. So this guy in the movie, his daughter drowned in a red raincoat. And he just has this image of her he keeps thinking about throughout. And throughout the film, you hear that there have been these murders in Venice where he is. It's just kind of a background thing that's going on. Out of the corner of his eye, and also in the background that he doesn't even see, you sometimes see a hooded little girl in a red coat. And she'll just like run around a corner, and it starts to become more and more prominent throughout. And when it catches his eye, there's just something, he knows it's not his daughter, but you can tell that he has some kind of hope in him that maybe it is, but it's like this bizarre, it's hard to explain, but you can see that when he's chasing after it at the very end at night, he hears her crying, and there's something about it that's pulling him toward it with like some kind of hope. And you hear this like little girl, it sounds like a little girl crying. You feel this weird hope for him too. Maybe I remember thinking this the first time I saw it, like, is this different than your experience?
I don't think I had that hope that it was ever real, but this is like, keep going.
In my mind, with the cinema language of it, there's no way it was his daughter, right? Like, you know that it's not, but it's like leading up towards something, and he can't help but chase after this little girl. And then he finds her in this really dark dead end, standing in a corner, like Blair Witch Project ending style. And her back is to him. And he walks over to her and says, "Hey, it's okay. It's okay." Like a dad to a little girl. All of a sudden, she turns around and looks at him, not a little girl at all. It's actually an old woman, little woman with the most unsettling face, not a made up face. So unsettling. Not a horror movie like makeup gag, just a real person that is so unsettling. And she turns around with a smile on her face, shaking her head back and forth as though to say, It's like, I can't even make sense of this expression that she has. Like, that's how it looks. And then from her pocket pulls out a knife and slashes his throat. And then it's kind of like his whole recent life starts flashing before his eyes while he's dying over music that's not death music. It's a different kind of eerie music. And then the movie ends basically like a one short scene later. And we just were not expecting that. Like, it sent something crazy through me that I haven't experienced that way. I've experienced jump scares. I've never experienced a scare that had a 2-hour buildup just for that moment.
Yeah. Well, and the atmosphere is just so, so good. It's all the characters, the way they're filmed, have a real menacing feel to them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just bit parts. I guess they're like minor characters where you have a priest and you have a medium and her sister and just
the
like
inspector
a hotel. Weird. Yeah, the inspector. Like, everybody is just so unsettling, but in a way that's very thoughtful, that when you look back on the plot of the movie, everybody's motivations make sense and their eccentricities, I guess you could call it, work for the story. And like, I think there's only one other movie so this movie also messes with time a little bit. Yes. Like, it intercuts with past and future things. And yeah, Solaris, which is that 1979? The Russian early 70s? I'm way off. That movie, it's not the same storyline at all, but it's the only other movie I can think of that terrified me 72. As much, 72, with its atmosphere. And so I think just the foreboding of near death in Don't Look Now, just water, falling, drowning. There's like I think maybe one of my favorite scenes is Donald Sutherland plays a restorer, building restorer.
Like ancient building restoration or something.
Yeah. And he's trying to put up an old statue and loses his balance. And he's kind of like hugging this statue with a grotesque face, and their faces are kind of bumping up against each other. Yeah. And it's so fun, but it's so, you just feel like every frame means something.
But also,
and you don't know what everything is like coming to get them. Yeah.
Like, each thing stands out as like, this person looks suspicious. Don't know what it means. Yep. This color, I haven't seen the color red. Now, all of a sudden, the mom has red boots. What does it mean? I don't know. Even this second time through, I didn't know what it meant, because the mom did have these red boots for a big part of the movie. And I was still wondering, like, what does it mean? But it so clearly means something, because the color red is so, like, it's so specific. It's not used.
Yeah, the color red is very foreboding. They make it so clear at the beginning with this like art slide that starts bleeding, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that kind of ties into the themes of like past, present, and future all kind of colliding together, because the daughter has the red raincoat and she's out playing while he's analyzing this photo of this church, and there is a person sitting there with, again, a red rain slicker, and that kind of image repeats throughout the entire movie, where it's like, is this an image from the future? Is this like an image that they snapped of their daughter while she was in church? Like, what is going on in the scene? And it just hangs over the movie with such a deadly pall that it's it's so masterful.
Well, it asks so many questions. And I know that, Joseph, you were talking about how like everyone is like introduced and you're like, everyone's suspicious. Like, I'm ready for everyone to have something terrible in their hearts and their minds. Even if it's not like murder, it's like they want it, everything. It's like you have so many questions and so many things happening. And you're like, all right, how does this fit in? How does this fit in? And it's like they're playing with expectations. Because you're like, I have no idea where this is going. Because I had seen this once before in a not my favorite scenario, because I watched it with my father, who thought this was the most boring piece of shit he's ever seen. And the whole movie, he was like talking about how boring it was. And I couldn't like concentrate on it as much. Like I knew it was something special at the end because I was quiet and I was just sitting there like trying to digest and process. It's a movie you have to like process really. After you watch it, you're like, wait a second, I need to buffer and like really think about it. He was immediately like, that was so boring. Like nothing happened. And I was like, everything just happened. So many things just happened in this movie. And because like, I mean, I'm going to bring this up now. Everyone talks about the sex scene in this movie between Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, which is this like gorgeous sex scene that everyone's like, oh yeah, it was like so realistic. And it's like, it's like this notorious sex scene that I think is like the best depiction of sex I've ever seen on screen. Like it's authentic sex that feels like it's not like this kind of idealized moment. It's not some like kind of, idealize what sex should be like. It's a couple, but it's also intercut with them getting dressed after sex and just like being normal people after sex. And it's such an interesting way that the film presents sexuality between a couple and then intercuts what after sex looks like for the couple and pushing the time together in such an interesting way. And having this like very obviously explicit, but very interesting sex scene of them just rolling around together. And it's just fascinating. It's really, people talk about the sex scene, but I'm like, but did they actually think about what the sex scene is like in the context of the movie? It's just really fascinating this time around thinking about that.
Yeah, it's mostly like the duration of it that people want to talk about just because it's unusually long. And obviously that stands out when you're watching it. I admit the first time I watched it, the duration of it and like just how much it shows like was the thing that stood out to me the most. The second time through, what you're saying was standing out to me. How there's this weird, like Donald Sutherland is trying to figure out what to do with his arms at a certain point. Like he, and they start laughing just a split second in the montage. And it's like, it's trying to be real. And I realize in this moment, like this relationship, it's all working toward showing this life after loss. That looks like. And it just helped emotionally with what they were currently experiencing. And then what Donald Sutherland would experience later when he thinks his wife's starting to lose her mind and like the impact of that on him.
I knew this movie was going to hit differently for me because we hadn't watched it since we've had kids together.
I was actually talking to Terry. I'm like, I wonder what this movie is like when you have children. Like watching this as a parent, like what that's like. So I'm glad you brought that up because I'm very curious, like what that was like.
Yeah, just specifically with the sex scene, I think that there was like this. I'm pretty sure this was intentional, but it was kind of they were trying to capture this moment of healing, or it was supposed to be a big moment in their lives, not just a slice of life. This is like an everyday sex scene. Like this is something that's happened after they've had a hard time connecting. And I just felt so much sympathy for them. Like just this idea of as a couple trying to cope with something that's accidentally kind of been like pulling you apart. But obviously both people are experiencing a deep amount of pain. So anyway, I think it's brilliant. And I think that this whole movie, I appreciated the little touches of trying to make the couple feel like a real couple.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even before that, the sex scene, there's the moment where they're in the bathroom and she's in the tub. He is just taking a shower. They're just sort of standing around naked together. It felt very lived in. She's kind of teasing him that he's cotton, love handles. And he's like quickly running to the scale and they're just being very playful. There's a feeling of authenticity and a very lived in relationship that these are real people that are just comfortable around each other, even though they're trying to navigate what life feels like after the most horrific moment that they probably could ever imagine ever happening to them. And it just, I don't know, it really, this time watching it, just all of those little tiny moments really jumped out at me.
I feel like that's one of the values of a movie like this is that It's not trying to scare you constantly.
Right.
And the runtime is all like headed toward this ending ultimately. And I feel like it was able to take time showing slices of life. Like if someone said, hey, you want to see a slice of life horror movie? I'd say no, like there's no way. But this movie has that aspect to it where it's like, I'm just going to show a conversation with a hotel worker.
Yeah.
Seemingly has nothing to do with anything. It's like taking too long, but it's so interesting. And the way that they talk or awkwardly laugh, it's all interesting. And it's all building toward, like you're saying, the lived-inness, Terry, that like is part of it. It's part of what the movie's trying to do, and it does so effectively.
Yeah.
It's my favorite use of nudity I've seen in a movie in a long time too. Just like, again, nudity is normal. It doesn't have to be sexualized. It doesn't have to be funny. It's just like sometimes couples are just naked with each other. Like it's just like living and being people, and this kind of interesting depiction of trying to go through what they think normal is, even though obviously their lives have been absolutely rocked, but they're still trying to go through these motions. Like, because we have the opening where the daughter dies and we cut from Julie Christie screaming to them in Venice. So there's like this very big jump of like from like this very horrendous moment to, okay, they're trying 6 months, I think, or something later, going through the motions, trying to kind of like get over it, but that's not the right word, but like kind of trying to pretend like everything is okay. And then we see them, like the grief kind of insidiously leaking in interesting moments. And I think it's such an incredible portrayal of grief that I never appreciated until I just rewatched this movie like last week for the podcast.
Yeah. It was weird watching this movie because one of my friends, like that I've known for like 16 years, just passed away unexpectedly, had a heart attack leaving a concert, and died 3 days before we were supposed to first record this. So I was kind of happy that we had to postpone recording for a week, because I didn't know if I was ready to talk about this movie, because it literally just happened. And the way that this movie kind of tackles grief in such a way that it feels like you're remembering things, the past is coming in, you're trying to live in the present, you're also thinking about a future. The way that this movie is very circuitous in that kind of train of thought, like it felt like a perfect encapsulation for the grief. And granted, I didn't lose a kid, but like the grief that I felt over losing someone that had been part of my life for almost 20 years. So like there's like it's really effective, and really it just like really hit me this time. And it was something that I didn't appreciate the first time I saw this movie, which I just like loved the way that it built up to that surprise ending. Whereas now I'm like watching this going, oh my God, no, this is, if I were to tell someone what does grief feel like, it would be this movie, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I usually feel like grief movies aren't for me, and they don't, in my mind, they're just sad, but it doesn't feel, there's nothing special, or it doesn't feel like it's making a contribution to my soul as I'm watching it in some kind of way, where this does. And one of the ways that it does this to me, where I feel like, oh, this is a real grief depiction, is like seeing right after the daughter's death, Donald Sutherland, Julie Christie, they have a shared experience with their grief. They're going through it in the same way, and they're fine in their marriage because of it. It's like they're sharing this thing in the same way. When she encounters the sidekick and gets told that the girl is there with them, and suddenly she's changed and she feels like she has joy, and she has this new perspective that her daughter's there. They're no longer sharing the same grief. Or it's a different experience for each of them. And you can see how Donald Sutherland is grieving not just the loss of his daughter, but no longer having this shared experience with his wife. And that was, I did not notice that the first time. But now that I'm married to Vanessa and we've had this companionship for a really long time, the shared experience in like even dealing with the stress of a film shoot is so important to me. And if there's a situation where I'm having a hard time with something that she's not, and she can't understand it, it's a lot more painful. And I could see that happening in this film. And
it's almost like Donald Sutherland feels a little bit betrayed by her empowerment, which is so heartbreaking. My heart is just so broken for Donald Sutherland's character the whole time. It's kind of like his grief is just, it's coming for him. And it's kind of like all the people around him are, I don't know if you call it embracing the supernatural, but embracing some kind of like higher meaning, except for him. and it feels so threatening to him. Yeah, even his gift, like, I don't know. I'm not saying smart things about this movie anymore, but I want somebody smart to talk about.
The thing that kind of splitting that like really jumped out at me this time was where Laura's belief in like in that the fact that the sisters see Christine sitting with them and that there might be kind of an afterlife, that maybe there's some kind of connection there, and that's kind of fueling her like healing process, whereas he doesn't seem to be able to accept that. And there's a really interesting moment, I clocked this because I've watched this twice in a week now, where she's trying to say, you know, she is not alive, but we can still see her and she is with us. And he's like, my daughter is dead. And it's like that, it wasn't like our daughter is dead. He says, my daughter is dead. Christine is dead. And he goes off on like this rant about it. But it's like this moment of like, why don't you understand? She's not with us anymore. And the past he kind of sees it as the past holding on to her, and that she's never going to be able to get out of this, which again, the movie so masterfully does, because it's so circuitous in its way of dealing with what happened, that this divergent path between the two was just so heartbreaking in that moment, that like it just like really leapt out at me that they have this roadblock between them because they're both approaching it from different perspectives instead of being able to talk to each other. And it was so heartbreaking this time.
Well, and also I think what stuck out, especially about the betrayal, like you said, Vanessa, was in so many horror movies, we get kind of like the woman's side of grief. We see her being very sad and her husband being like, suck it up, like, you know, like putting that's reductive. But this one shows a united front almost in grief. And like they're having a very similar experience together. And then we see it diverge. And I feel like in horror, you don't see that. You usually see everyone. Obviously, grief is a very individual experience, but in this one, we see them kind of grieving together. And then once you see them almost separating because she's finding this comfort and explanation. And he's like, he found his daughter. He was the one that pulled her out of the water. He had this like very physical interaction with her dead body, and is this kind of revelation. And he's like, okay, cool. So we're no longer on the same page about this. And now I'm alone in this. Like, yeah, grief is such an isolating experience. And now I'm even further isolated from the person I thought understood this more than anybody else. And that's so heartbreaking to see that kind of, you know, it's never said, but it's portrayed so well just through dialogue and through Donald Sutherland's performance of what it feels like to be, oh my God, like the person I loved the most who had gone through this horrible thing to me, we've been bonded by this. They no longer are on the same page as me. And now I am fully alone. And now we're in a foreign country. We are in Italy. We don't speak the same language. I can barely speak Italian. I don't really understand Italian. And now you're going off talking about ghosts with these two strange old women. And like, now I'm fully just isolated. And it's so sad. Like, it's really sad to see that character go through that. And it's portrayed so well and so masterfully, and it's just heartbreaking to see him experiencing that. It's like he's grieving all over again. Like now he's grieving for his wife. He feels like it's almost like he's grieving for the person he no longer knows. He all of a sudden no longer knows his wife almost, and it's just like, oh
yeah. And then the movie just like piles on that with him actually feeling like she's missing.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, you're just feeling for the poor guy, and it's almost like you almost feel like Donald Sutherland's carrying around like a sin, like by having the gift, he's doing something wrong, but you're like, what is he doing wrong? Like there's nothing that you can really put your finger on. And I think maybe that represents his guilt of like, he's carrying around something, even though it's not real. I don't know, but the mood, man, the mood.
And literally, I wrote down my last note while watching this movie was, this movie makes me feel stupid. And like, as it ended, I didn't feel that way, but like, it just is doing so many cool things, and it's like almost overwhelming your senses of like, I feel like there's so many cool things going on here that I am not fully comprehending, and I am not intelligent enough to understand what's going on, but I love what I'm watching and I love the experience, but I don't know if I fully comprehend it. And it's just, it's such a good fucking movie. My professional assessment.
We're making it sound so intellectual, but also as a horror movie, it just delivers.
But like,
I think it's scary as hell. Even without all of the character development.
But you have to watch it where you can give yourself to the movie.
Yeah.
And otherwise you're going to be like, this is boring piece of shit. like kind of thing.
You got to put yourself in a dark room, get offline, and
you
just
put your phone away. Like you really do have to pay
sure.
attention to it. Like this is a movie that demands your attention, and it's incredible.
One of the things it also does really well is this idea of miscommunication, because the couples are miscommunicating with each other. They're both reading the signs completely wrong. Like there's danger in Venice. You got to get out. They're each seeing this as different moments. She sees it as, oh, Johnny, who's at, boarding school, he got hurt. This must be that omen. John Sr. falls out of like the scaffolding in a very masterful shot sequence, and he thinks, oh, maybe that's the danger they're talking about. Everyone's misreading the signs. Meanwhile, as they're talking in Italian, there's no subtitles. Like the movie does not use subtitles whatsoever, which gives like this sort of disconnect between what we're seeing and what's actually happening. We have to pick things up through visual cues and kind of piece things together along with what's happening in the narrative, where they're trying to read the different signs and figure out what's going on and figure out who this person in red is moving through the streets. And there's murders happening, and there's omens, and there's psychic, and there's grief, and there's all this stuff, but we're misreading those signs just as much as we're not able to really, unless you speak Italian, really able to understand what is being communicated with everyone in Venice. It just gives this sort of isolation. It just incorporates that isolation so well in a simple thing of not having subtitles.
Dude, one of my favorite moments in the film is right after Donald Sutherland almost falls to his death. He's walking with the priest to the river, and he starts talking about, like, I think this may be the thing that my wife was talking about, like a prophecy or something. And he almost finds relief that it's real, like that there is a greater meaning, or maybe he can, like maybe his wife's experience is something that he can like latch onto. But then it's almost immediately taken away as soon as the body is being dragged from the water, and you can just see in his face him going back to this like nihilistic type place of, I don't know, despair. And maybe I'm projecting that all onto his face because he's such a good actor, but I love that moment.
But the guy can't catch a break. He can't have a moment of feeling any kind of relief throughout it, because there's that. There's also, he almost gets out and he's on the boat, and he's going back home, and he sees his wife on a boat going the other direction. And the first time you watch it, you don't know that it's not his wife, that it's a premonition. Because what's cool about this movie is in moments like that, in the Shining, when there is a shining moment or a vision, it cuts into a vision, and you know that that's what's happening, and it's scary in its own way. In this, you can't tell the difference. Like he sees this premonition as a real scene in his life. And then it turns out after he dies, he was just seeing a step ahead to right after he dies, and his wife coming in for his funeral, dressed in black. And it's just handled so well in an unusual way. It's not the only movie to do this, but it feels very special when you're watching it, like a special kind of cinematic horror experience.
Yeah, I also love the like comment on reality, where it's kind of like he's been critical of his wife for her questionable perception of reality, but he's actually the character that's having the hardest time distinguishing between real life and reality. And I just love movies that delve into that, like, what is reality area.
Well, it goes back to the miscommunication too, because she's on a funeral boat. Like, it is a funeral boat. They are dressed in funeral attire, but he is so shook by the fact that it's his wife who's supposed to be in England, who's back in Venice now, and that he's again misreading these cues that, like, yeah, okay, if my significant other was going down a river in a funeral, I'd have so many questions. But it's like all these like little things that he's missing because he is so caught up in not understanding what's actually happening, vice what is right in front of him. And it goes back to, in the very beginning of the movie, he begins the film by saying nothing is what it seems, because his wife is talking about their daughter, who asked about, if the world is round, why is ice on lakes, flat? And she's digging into and finding out, and finds out that there's their actual curvature. And he's like, nothing is what it seems. And then later on, when they're in the restaurant, he tells her, seeing is believing. So it's this idea of like seeing is believing, but also nothing is what it seems. And this movie takes both of those and just sort of like compounds that confusion so well. It just there's so many little moments that I think what makes this movie so special is that you could give 20 different critics and say, go write a piece about this, and they're all going to latch onto something different and have different readings, have different things between like the editing of it or the themes, and everyone's gonna be able to write something completely different because there are so many little tiny things in this movie that it's doing so masterfully.
Also, for sure, everybody, like the red boots for me, I was trying to guess what it was, but like those kinds of moments stand out to people as meaning something. It's going to mean something different. I'm the kind of person who likes to know that the director knew what it meant, like had a specific idea. But it for sure, like in The Shining, all these things that don't make sense, I have this faith that the creator of it knows what it means, and that's important to me, but I have no idea what it means.
Right. Like speaking of the red, there's also that ball that's in the beginning of the movie that their son is playing with, and then someone else in Venice has the exact same ball. There's like these little tiny mirror images and doppelganger moments that this movie kind of puts out there, like the woman in the rain slicker and the kid in the rain slicker, and the fact that there's a moment when the inspector says age makes women grow to look more like each other. Men decay and each become distinct, but women seem to converge. And there's this idea of all these realities sort of converging together in mirror images, doppelgangers, that kind of aspect. It's just, I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
I never made that connection until this moment about that thing happening. Like wow, oh my, this is the first time I'm realizing it, because his daughter, as he's young, and then the woman is old at the end, but they're the same, that they're the person. Wow,
there's so much.
I thought it was just clever small talk because the guy just keeps pestering him about this theory he has, and Donald Sutherland won't say yes. He'll just it's like awkward laughs about it. But that's cool.
There's so many little moments like that. It just peppered through that I think if you watch this movie 20 times, you might start to pick up different. It's wild to me. It's wild.
Yeah. Also the danger of knowing the future. I love that this plays with that. I think that's something that's always scary to me. Like if you can't look into the future, just don't look now. Just kidding.
On that note, bye. It's over.
There is one other thing that really jumped out at me this time: the idea of causation. So, like, there's this throughout this entire movie, there are these little tiny events that are rolling into the snowball of the end reveal. So we have, in particular, there's the moment in the restaurant where they're in Venice, they're sitting there. He says it's getting cold and he goes and closes the window. Him closing the window causes the door to open, which causes something to fly into the eye of one of the sisters, who goes over and ends up tripping over and getting involved with Laura, who goes to the restroom to help them out. If that didn't happen, if he hadn't closed that window, this story would have played out so differently. And there's all these little tiny moments that are just like, if this happened, then this happened, and this happened. And eventually he's getting his throat slit by a little old woman. It's like this weird kind of causation thing that just, there's so many levels.
And it leads to like this inevitability thing, which is one of the things that scared me the most about Hereditary, which I think there's some really interesting parallels between those two movies, but that's another podcast. But I think like it plays the inevitability, and like this night we talked about nihilism, especially with Donald Sutherland's character. But I also feel like the whole film has this nihilism, and like even if you can look into the future, you don't actually know what you're seeing, because like we always like, you know, we have this sister, we have like the mystical blind person, which is all we always have, is like being able to see things and kind of tell and warn you. But then you have Donald Sutherland, who has a similar gift, but is like, I don't know what the fuck I'm seeing. This kind of prevalent nihilism of like, no matter what you do, man, like you don't know what you're seeing. You don't know what's going on. Like even if you can see the future, you don't know how to interpret it. So it's like one thing to be able to see it, but it's the other to understand it. And in that ability to not understand, you kind of just walk into the trap. So this prevalent nihilism here that I think is so fascinating as well.
Yeah, it's almost like Donald Sutherland's punished for fighting against the inevitability. Yeah. It's like it definitely has this feeling of like what's going to happen is what's going to happen, and him giving pushback to that just keeps getting him in deeper and deeper. Yeah. I hate that. We have control.
Right.
I have control of my own life. It's fine. It's all fine.
Well, the other moment that literally jumped out at me on this last rewatch that goes on with this, the idea of causation, is when they're having the seance, and it's Laura and the two sisters, and John is trying to kind of eavesdrop, and he goes into the hallway outside her door, and he's like accosted by the people in the hallway, and he's like, English, and he ends up leaving. Well, later on in the movie, they're like, we had to switch places because there was a prowler about. So he is literally the reason why they ended up switching hotels. And because they switched hotels and he went to go take her to the hotel is the reason that he sees the woman in red. Like, there's all of these little tiny things that it's like
that's totally
ripples.
I didn't realize they were talking about him, but that's totally what they were talking about.
Just so many, like, and that literally this last time I was watching this, I was like, holy shit, he's the fucking prowler.
Well, now I gotta rewatch this movie again, like tonight, and like I'm gonna be like that fucking screen cap from Always Sunny with Charlie Day with the conspiracy board behind him. He's pointing at it. It's gonna be me, just like
it goes all the way to the top.
Oh my god. I feel like I'm going to talk about this movie for like 6 hours, but do we want to wrap this up now and give it a rating out of 5 before we become sucked into our own hole of nihilism and inevitability?
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and running out of babysitter time.
Yeah.
That's the only motivation I have to stop talking about this.
Yeah, you know what? Good point. Okay, Terry, so how many red raincoats out of 5 do you give Don't Look Now?
There's no beating around the bush. This is a 5 raincoat movie. This movie is perfect.
Yes.
I love everything about it. I love the way the movie is structured. The editing of this movie is sublime. It's a perfect movie. The end. What about you, Mary Beth?
Yeah, 5 out of 5. The more I think about it, the more it's just like Jesus Nicholas Roeg, the director.
Who would go on to direct Witches, which is another movie that terrified people on this podcast.
So weird.
Really?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. So everything about this movie is just absolutely stunning and incredible and comes together into this wild conclusion that you immediately want to watch the movie over again. So 5 out of 5, perfect, chef's kiss. But Joseph and Vanessa, you have the final word. How many red raincoats out of 5 do you give Don't Look Now?
Oh, 5 for sure. Yeah.
Like, even before the rewatch, it's always been, since that first screening, a 5 raincoat film in our minds. And it really, to me, the appreciation went way up the second time through. I didn't think that it could because it was such a special experience for us. But it's so good. Like you're saying, layers. You can watch it many times and pick up on different things.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies. I'm so glad you guys liked it. That would have been awkward if you guys were like,
this movie's boring bullshit.
Boring.
That would have been so awkward, but good thing we all are obsessed with it. That's all.
Yes. Well, thank you both so much for joining us to talk about this movie. Where can our listeners find you? And do you have anything the floor is yours? Do you have anything you want to talk about or plug?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Joseph Winter VHS.
And I'm Vanessa M. Winter. And I guess VHS 99, because it's coming out on the 20th.
October 20th. Deadstream is out right now on Shudder. Both of these films are on Shudder.
Go watch them. All right, listeners, you've heard from us. If we want to hear from you, what was your experience with Don't Look Now? Send us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us directly on Twitter. I'm at MB McAndrews.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at Scarred Podcast.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe, and maybe support us through Patreon.
Thank you. Thank you to Eric Power for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.
Somebody please think of the Somebody please think of the children. Somebody please think of the children.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
What is The Briefing Room?
It's a behind-the-scenes look at how the criminal justice system works and the lives of the people within that system.
If you love true crime, well, these are the real people who do the job every day of making sure justice is served.
Hi, I'm Detective Dave.
I'm Detective Dan. Together, we have decades of experience in local law enforcement, a profession that we think is often misunderstood.
So we're going to explore how to do it right, and we won't shy away from when it's done wrong. These are stories you'll hear nowhere else. Unique, frank, and unvarnished.
From the team that brought you Small Town Dicks, this is The Briefing Room. Episode 1 drops on August 30th. We'll meet you in the briefing room.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.